Hello, my name is George Johnson. Today I'm going to talk about the history of terrorism. I will briefly discuss some different ways that historians, terrorism experts, and doctoral candidates have examined and defined terrorism in history. As far back as Rome, revolutionaries have resorted to unconventional forms of warfare to influence populations and overthrow ruling powers. This has included the use of terrorism. Yet today, the world still lacks a common standard definition and understanding of terrorism and what terrorism is, causing policymakers, law enforcement, and warfighters around the world to struggle in their development of counterterrorism strategy and implementation measures. In his work, Inside Terrorism, Bruce Hoffman argued that the world's elusive quest to develop a standard definition rests in the changing meaning and usage of the word over time. He contended that terrorism is both a form of violence and a political concept, and its political character distinguishes it from other forms of violence. Hoffman defined terrorism as the pursuit of political change by the creation and exploitation of fear through violence or the threat of violence. Bard E. O'Neill emphasized the insurgent nature of terrorism. In his work, Insurgency and Terrorism, From Revolution to Apocalypse, terrorism, along with guerrilla warfare and conventional warfare, are instruments of violence or forms of warfare within insurgency. He further defines terrorism as the threat or use of physical coercion, primarily against non-combatants, especially civilians, to create fear in order to achieve various political objectives, to include behavior modifications in individuals, select groups, the general public, governments, or some combination thereof. In his dissertation, Living Through Terror and Terror Through Living, the biopolitical dimensions of religion, security, and terrorism, Donnie Featherstone used primary and secondary sources on terrorism and relied heavily on the theories of Giorgio Agamben and Michael Foucault in their works on biopolitics. Featherstone proposed that a new approach to defining and understanding terrorism is to analyze the historical interactions between terrorism, politics, and religion. He argued that biopolitics and neoliberalism clashed with the very religious ideas upon which they were constructed, thereby producing terrorism, a problem of biopolitics and not a problem for biopolitics. Therefore, he concluded, terrorism is a problem that requires new forms of political possibilities to solve. David C. Viola approached his study of terrorism by examining it as a form of domestic political violence in the United States. In his dissertation, Terrorism and the Response to Terrorism in New York City during the long 60s, Viola explored the history of law enforcement and intelligence efforts to combat terrorism in New York. He argued that New York serves as a microcosm of the broader American experience with terrorism. He analyzed primary, secondary, and tertiary sources and concluded that the history of terrorism in the United States is much more diverse and complicated than popular historiography has portrayed it to be. He contended that the study of the history of terrorism in New York City better informs our understanding today of the impact that political violence has had on the trajectory of the history of the United States. That concludes my discussion on the different ways that scholars have examined and defined terrorism in history. Thank you.